What is up, guys? Welcome to the theScore eSports podcast. I am your temporary host, Josh Burry. In the booth with me today, it is the one, the only, Daniel Rosen.
Hello. You say temporary as in you're not going to be the host halfway through this podcast.
Yeah, there's actually going to be like
you're the emergency guest host. I guess not a guest host. You're an emergency host.
Yeah. There's going to be a free-for-all.
Oh, really?
Through this podcast, and the winner, I think it's going to be like a free-for-all COD match.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that our guest is going to win.
Yeah, I hope so.
So our guest is a new host of this podcast. You're really putting some burdens on our guest.
He is an OG.
That's true.
And I mean that in multiple ways. So,
nice pun.
Yeah, if you have maybe got some hints, there is a COD connection. And in fact, we are going to be talking with Ryan Musselman, also known as OpTicJ, co-founder of OpTic Gaming, and currently acting as their president, I believe, Daniel?
Yep. President of OpTic Gaming at the moment. And so without further ado, Josh, why don't you bring Ryan on?
Ryan, are you with us?
I'm with you guys. I heard the COD chat there.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure.
The trick is that I haven't played Call of Duty in, maybe since Modern Warfare 1, and Josh mostly watches Call of Duty, so I think you're fine.
We should be good, although I've been so damaged and tarnished by my old men of OpTic awful teammates. So maybe some of their bad play influences have come into play here. Maybe you guys have the chance. I don't know. We'll see.
So they're holding you back is what I'm hearing, right?
They're holding me back, man.
Okay. So could we see you sign with a new team anytime soon? Like, are you going back on the pro circuit or what?
Probably. I've already signed like 10. There's 10 contractual obligations that I've already made, and they don't even know. 10. This is bad news.
Oh, man.
You signed with 10 different teams. That's going to be an interesting experience.
Activision is going to love that.
Yeah.
I needed plan all the way through like plan L and M and whatever. I probably didn't even match up the numbers with the letters, but I needed a lot of backup plans because I'm not that good anymore, dude.
But going to what you guys are good at right now, we wanted to start by talking a little bit about Overwatch with Outlaws. You guys, I think, placed pretty well in the first stage, and I think you're 3-1 right now in the second stage.
With 2-1.
2-1. Sorry, 2-1 with a win over last stage's champions. So congratulations on that. I wanted to ask a little bit about sort of how Overwatch League and the Outlaws have kind of panned out for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first answer is just wonderfully, right? So what many people don't really understand is that the Outlaws are actually a completely separate brand from OpTic. OpTic is a part of the holdings company of Infinite Esports and Entertainment that owns the Houston Outlaws, and OpTic is one of those entities there. And OpTic played a key role really in just getting that brand onto its feet, right? So things are going exceptionally well, both on the content side, the competitive side. The players are amazing. They're great people to interact with. I think you might have seen some of the pictures of, and then with Tyrong, the way he brings the team together. It's just a great bunch of guys, both on and off the field and in other contexts like content. So we are absolutely excited to see where this goes this year. And you've seen, they started off stage 1 with maybe a little bit of a rocky start, ended it really strong. They're starting off stage 2 really strong, and couldn't be more proud, man.
I mean, they're definitely, like you said, they're it's an amazing start to them, and I think within the office, I think there are a few doubters, but people have turned.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about, because you mentioned Infinite Esports there, and this is mostly a personal thing that I'm curious about. I know kind of the situation there, but can you talk a little bit about sort of what the operations there are? Like, does Infinite Esports, is it just a holding company and everything runs on its own as is, or is there some input from the investors that essentially run Infinite Esports?
Yeah, there's a lot of great partnerships going on. Neil Liebman has been just tremendously amazing to work with. He's diving into the space. He's doing his research. There's a running joke that he's Neil-licious, right? So he says, hey, if anyone ever needs a sub, Neil-licious is here. That's his stage name. So he'll come into the scene one day, and we'll put him on the main stage and see how he performs. Maybe he'll take the world by surprise. But it's a great partnership across the board at the holdco level, and then with the other companies in the ecosystem. So, we've got a content company, No Scope Media. There's a partnerships and sales company, Youth Academy Development. We brought merchandise in-house, although we still have some of our great partnerships out there with some of the merch licensing. And it's just this very strong ecosystem of people coming together, right? And you kind of see just brands growing up here or starting their new journey in coordination with OpTic and coordination with the Outlaws. It's pretty unique. It's been a great learning experience, right, to scale this up.
All right. So something that I want to bring up is that in September, I believe, I interviewed you, and you told me that you believed OpTic fans were passionate enough to sort of move across games as you guys expanded. That obviously, again, Outlaw is a separate corporate entity, but they are tied to OpTic. And at the time we were talking about Overwatch, since you guys have also gotten into Dota, into League of Legends. So I want to ask, has that held true? Have OpTic fans, has the Green Wall moved with you guys as opposed to just gathering fans from those games?
Yeah, I think we're doing a lot of testing and learning to really see how it ultimately translates over and how much we're contributing to one pool of fans and one vertical versus another. But absolutely, the Green Wall, the reason we call it the Green Wall is because it has that unity, right? That family unity kind of bonded together to build something strong, right? Together stronger. And so we see that really it spilled over into the Outlaws, and the engagement on just a new YouTube channel and Twitter over the past 4 to 5 months, as it's really been in full swing, is incredible, right? When we brought on Dota, for example, there was a huge community gathering in the Discord, the OpTic Discord, and someone took the lead on explaining Dota to a lot of the COD fans, a lot of the CSGO fans who had not crossed over into that game yet, or who had not ever watched that game before. So you kind of see like a crowdsourced management situation happening where people are coming on board, they're becoming leaders in the community, and they're stepping up and they're really starting to participate in the conversation at the benefit of others.
So then I want to jump on that, because you mentioned that like one of the big things that drives this stuff, you mentioned it then in that interview, you've already mentioned it a couple times now, is that one of the things that drives that fan base to be so engaged is your guys' kind of content-oriented strategy. And I want to ask, when you guys were building these teams, because OpTic has had some crazy expansion over the last 6 months or so, and it's been amazing to watch from the outside, but when you're building these teams, when you're bringing on these players, did content creation factor in? Because I remember in October when I asked Hex about this, he told me like we were always looking to sign big personalities. So was that sort of the case when you're building these rosters?
Yeah, content creation is always going to be probably one of the most important things we do, because we really have taken such strong efforts to build the individual brands of the players in coordination with the overall growth of the brand, right? We want to raise the tide across the board. So it's not so much that a personality needs to be big, it's the fact that we want to make that personality big, right? So you look at some of our Outlaws players in comparison to some of the Call of Duty players on the OpTic side, you could see the COD players have a much larger and more social engagement, but we took our rich content history and said, how do we plug it into some of the smaller brands to really elevate those brands across the board? So we look at content and we say, what series can we create and or replicate, right? That has maybe a similar tone, a similar likeness, a similar image that you'd see in maybe like a Vision versus our new series Focus for the Outlaws. And how do we start building the brands again, right? We stick to a very similar strategy because we know what we're good at and we know how it's going to benefit everyone across the board. And that happens at the player level and the brand level. So it's very, very important for us to continue to ensure that content is a pillar in what we do with building these brands, both in franchise and out of franchise leagues.
Ryan, I like that you talked about how important content creation is to OpTic, because as I've been doing research for numerous projects that involve OpTic, that has been like a recurring theme, is that this is an important part of OpTic. And in fact, even to this day, if you go to the main OpTic channel, your description is that you guys are, I think it says, the #1 gaming entertainment company, which is a bit different from an esports first. Like if you think about Cloud9, obviously they are an organization that was an esports organization. Yes, they do content creation, but that was never the focus at the very beginning, right?
Yeah, and just a quick comment on that. So when we really started off in the gaming world, the esports world, it wasn't about getting individual pro players and, just all the different esports or competitive games in the landscape. It was really about how do we win in Call of Duty, and not just Call of Duty, but specifically content as it relates to Call of Duty. So it was a very I don't know, just in the same spirit of the green wall, that unification process, right? We focused on just one vertical, exceptionally improved in one vertical, grew in one vertical, and then chose to expand versus just instant expansion, right? So I think that has a lot to do with it. And we did it at the right time when Call of Duty was very, very hot on YouTube back in 2009, 2010. Modern Warfare 2 was one of the greatest media releases, and I can't remember some of the stats from that day. And you see that just perpetuated, right? It's been a rich part of the history, and now we're applying the learning and all of the testing that took place to everything else that we do. So it's important.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you guys had the Modern Warfare 2 montage that Hex did with the Xbox that he had purchased, which is such a cool story.
Hey.
And that video is still, I mean, potentially one of the most important videos for Call of Duty from that era, really, because of how popular it was and how important it was for OpTic. I mean, at least from my perspective. But I want to ask a little bit about content creation now, as it relates to League of Legends.
Sure.
League of Legends is an esport where we do see content creation from players, but we don't see the same level of content creation that we've seen from like Call of Duty. Specifically, some of your most famous players ever, like Nadeshot, who I want to ask about later. But we just don't see that, like, I'm going to do content creation 8 hours a day from League of Legends players. So is it difficult at all to wrangle players? Are you wrangling these League of Legends players to do this content creation? Is there like a balance sort of that had to be adjusted for this esport for you guys?
I'd say a little bit, but I think that is not. I don't know if it's so unique to League of Legends. I say it definitely is. When I was working at YouTube, I would definitely answer this question probably a little bit different. But the way content creation on YouTube, that short form with potential to be more long form and more premium content, has evolved, we've kind of evolved our strategy to say, well, why don't we just build the videography or videographers around them, build an ecosystem of content creation around them that organically fits into their day-to-day, from training to really getting onto the main stage. So we don't want to put our players in a situation where they're forced to go outside of their comfort zone, and especially if it's going to disrupt how they're developing for being in their weekly matches, right? So for us, it was more of an adjustment of saying, how can we execute this more efficiently where it's complementary to what they're doing versus more intrusive? And that's really kind of been key to us stepping into this space. And I'd say it's probably the same thing with the Outlaws as well, right? They're really focused on competition. That's exactly what they should be doing. And we can be better about improving the ecosystem around them.
Mm-hmm. So then I'm interested. Bringing that up, are there more severe time restrictions in League of Legends and Overwatch based on the amount of games you have to play, based on the amount of time you have to practice? Are there more severe time restrictions in certain esports when it comes to content creation? And how does that impact you with the kinds of content you end up having to make? I know you touched on it a little bit, but I kind of want to go deeper into that.
Yeah, I think it's going to vary across the board, right? So when you look at our esports vertical and how we're operating that, it's not just about how they practice and train, pre-match, but we've also hired 3 performance coaches to come in and help with diet, nutrition, cognitive wellness, everything across the board that really plays into how your mindset develops on the field. So their time does get taken up, but it's all relative to them being the best performers they possibly can be on stage. So again, it really just goes back to us being really good in advance about scheduling time to have those video shoots, to make sure it's complementary to their overall schedule. So it's not intrusive, and it just fits into the fabric and the overall DNA of what we're trying to build.
So it sounds to me like you said you're building around this. I'm wondering, because like you both I think all 3 of us now kind of touched on the idea that it takes a lot of time to be competitive, and it takes a lot of time to make premium content that an audience really wants to watch. I think everybody here kind of knows that from different angles. Is victory and content creation compatible in certain esports? Maybe, obviously in some esports it is, but are there esports where it doesn't work, or can you always find a way?
Yeah, you can always find a way. And it just comes through being very organized in advance and ensuring that your videographers are also kind of doubling as very strong project managers, right? So from our end, we'll likely storyboard out, in a sense, what is this next episode going to be? how often do we need the players, and how quickly can we get out of them what it is we need, so it's not being disruptive to what's happening that week, right? So you'll see us kind of adjust strategy on the fly as well. If we're doing content at an event, we're not going to have a camera in their face an hour before their match, right? It's going to be when matches are done for the day. Plus, it's even better because they can reflect on what's happened throughout the day. We don't want to kind of be the first thing they see when they wake up and when they go to bed. So it does take some strategic planning in advance, but overall, the more organized and the more we've done to test and learn and optimize has been very helpful in this process. And I think the players appreciate it too, right? When they understand that, hey, we're building around you, we still need your involvement, and it's good for your brand. I know that they see the value in it, but I think we've done a great job of maturing and adding more sophistication to our overall content operation over the years by putting a focus on that. I think it's been easier for everyone across the board.
It's fun. It's nice to hear you say that, because it for you guys making content feels very much like we don't want to be the right in their face. We don't want to bug them at an event. We don't want to we've got to make sure we work around people's schedules. It just really sounds like what I have to do when I try to interview people. So it's nice that everybody shares that struggle.
Yeah, no, I love it. The first thing when I hopped on the phone with you guys is, hey, can you get a camera? It's awesome. It's great. I'm with you guys, man. So.
Well, I actually wanted to shift gears a little bit, Ryan, and ask about some of the, I guess, rivals, if you want to call them that we've seen OpTic have over the years. And I guess first off, I want to ask, has there been a meaningful sort of development of rivalry between yourself and the, I guess, brainchild of one of your most devoted ex-players, Nadeshot? So is there an OpTic 100 Thieves rivalry in your opinion? And if not, could one develop in the future?
Yeah, so I love Nadeshot. I feel like there's that rivalry when we played them, as you guys know, when the first split started. Super close game, lasted for 10 years before the match was finally over. And I think that rivalry is happening, and it's good. Rivalries in esports I think they're so important, because going back to the content creation we were just talking about, it lends to a new storyline. It lends to new character development. It lends to fleshing out the scene and giving more reason for fans to choose one team over another, or kind of sit on the fence and wonder where their allegiance really lies, right? I think it's very, very important. So to answer your question, yeah, I would say that a good rivalry is developing, and it'll continue to be fleshed out over time. So we have to see where it goes, right? But I think it's a good rivalry to have, right? You got Hex and Nadeshot, both very prominent personalities in the space, and Nadeshot forming his own team, and we have our own team. So I like to see that dynamic, very similar to what we had with Envy and Call of Duty, right? And it's good for the scene. I think it gives the fans excitement of a tentpole game that's happening outside of the playoffs, right? So not everything super exciting will happen just when playoffs are on the line or prize money's on the line. It happens with more of the narrative throughout the season due to rivalries. So that's my long way of saying yes, there's a rivalry. Yeah.
You actually preempted one of my questions that I want to ask, Ryan, which is we actually did a video about the OpTic FaZe rivalry and its unique sort of nature, perhaps not initially built out of competition, but two fan bases built on YouTube through content creation. And then when both you guys were in esports, it actually, the competitive rivalry starts eventually. But how would you say that the OpTic Envy rivalry could be characterized? Like, what is your just general feeling of that rivalry? As an institution of esports, really, and of Call of Duty?
Yeah, I mean, we're friends with all of those guys, so it's kind of hard to look at them from the competitive side versus when it's all competition. So I look at it more as who can make the claim of having like the largest social following or the largest clout, right? I mean, obviously they have just done such an exceptional job of having that full-blown engagement all the time. So I'd say the rivalry there is, who's flexing more when it comes to that social presence. And then of course that does spill over. It actually makes for an even more interesting narrative when it goes to the main stage in competition, right? You've got their large fan base cheering for them, our large fan base cheering for us, and it's a good, healthy rivalry, I'd say. Very good, healthy rivalry.
Have you seen that jump into Overwatch, given that you guys are both the, affiliated with the Texas teams? Like, has that been like, major within Overwatch for you at all?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if you ever saw some of the tweets that we go back and forth with the Dallas Fuel. One in particular that I absolutely love, where one of their guys, I think it was Tasmo, goes into the shop at the Blizzard Arena, takes our jersey and puts it behind the Dallas Fuel jersey, and then we answered back with a video where our general manager goes in, grabs our jersey, or looks for our jersey, but he can't find it because it's sold out. So the whole point is like, hey, it's cute that you guys tried to hide us, but we're on the scene and we can't even find you, right? So it was just it was cool to see that rivalry develop. And again, it's all in good nature. That they have a great squad over there, and it's cool to see that spill out on stage. I'm ready to play them in this next stage. I want to see what that looks like this time, because the first time we played them, it just completely wiped them. Team Texas is here, guys. You heard it here. So it's fun.
Well, excited for the rematch. I want to jump back to talking a little bit about kind of OpTic's expansion lately, because again, last time, having spoken with various people within OpTic over the last couple of months, since then you guys have all the as far as we know, all of the expansions are mostly done for now, and we have you guys in basically every major esport game at the moment. So I'm kind of wondering, is there anywhere left for you guys to expand in terms of growing OpTic as an esports entity?
Is there anywhere left for term to expand in like different verticals of esports?
Yes, essentially.
I think so, but we're very careful with that, right? I know you've seen a lot of expansion come out from OpTic, specifically in 2017, with us adding Dota. That's the first time we actually stepped out of the shooters, right? So I would say yes, but not in the immediate future. We don't want to. We're very careful of brand dilution and how it could potentially develop, and we don't ever want to find ourselves saying, should we have done this, right? We want to do that very calculated, very carefully, and make sure whatever vertical we bring in actually is more complementary to the set. I keep using the word complementary, but I'm serious about it. It's a word we often use when we're talking, because we don't want to add disruption internally. We want to make sure that it is building more bricks in the green wall. It's adding more of that unity. It's in line with our branding feel, our approach, our rapport with the community. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is with an asterisk, because we want to be calculated.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That definitely makes sense. Something I did want to ask about kind of on that specific angle, though. You guys are hosting a fighting game tournament with OpTic Arena, I believe. And a few weeks ago, you guys actually, I think, hosted Knuckle Dew at your offices. And I'm wondering, obviously you said you guys are expanding carefully, but clearly you're expressing at least some interest in the fighting game scene. I kind of want to ask why that is.
So it's not so much the fighting game scene specifically that has a great community, and I've always been fascinated by Street Fighter and some of those other games were some of the first that I ever played. But when I look at the fighting game community, or maybe it's better to say it like this, when I look at the OpTic Arena opportunity, it's more about esports as a community versus a specific fighting game competition that we're throwing. So OpTic Arena is more general across the board, and it's less about saying come to this very specific tournament, because it's fighting game focused and we're focused on fighting games. So we're looking at how do we embrace the community as a whole in all of this as well. So does that make sense? Sorry, that sounded a little confusing in my head when I explained it, but really it's just more like esports and the celebration festivity of esports in connection with ACON, another event that's happening at the same time.
I can definitely, I think I understand where you're coming from. At the very least, it's a lot easier to set up, let's bring people together to do an esport you can participate in as an amateur. Is definitely, you can participate in Street Fighter more easily as an amateur than you can in CSGO when you need to find 4 other people to play on a team with you.
Right.
It's definitely more effective there. I'm wondering about, as you mentioned, going back to the previous question about expansion 2017 and being careful, you guys are definitely innovators in the esports space when it comes to content. And I think a lot of people, over the years have mimicked that style. But you guys have only really, again, that huge expansion happened mostly in 2017. And I'm kind of want to know, why did you guys choose to wait so long on that?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I think ultimately for us, it's that calculated approach really does take time, and it takes financial resources, right? You have to bring on new sponsors. You have to think about how you're still going to finance other teams. There's raises, there's more travel involved. And while that's mostly covered by the league, our content operation actually gets pretty robust, right? So we have to allocate more operating budget in that direction. So when you just come to the financial portion of running a business, you have to be very careful, especially where esports was at the time for us, very grassroots, and we're on our capital run, right? Looking to see who's our long-term financial and strategic partner, and ultimately turned out to be a great partner in Neil Liebman and a few others. And so it's really those nuances of running a business operation, and then just saying, does it make sense? How does it fit in? And where do we take a risk? Because I think the Dota announcement caught everyone off guard. No one expected that. And while there was speculation, OpTic applied for League of Legends, are they going to get in? For us just to come out of nowhere and say, boom, Dota as well, I think taking those risks helps with that calculation. But even then, getting into Dota, a very strong established esport where salaries could be higher, or it requires more management infrastructure to manage that evaluation process takes time. And it's not as simple as just going and saying, we're going to expand into this. Here's the 5 players we want. Go,
Ryan, I'm glad you brought up Dota. But before I go into that, I'm a little bit disappointed that I didn't hear you say you're going to get a Rainbow Six Siege team. That game's pretty hot right now, and I'd love an OpTic charm. What? Oh my God, I'm excited.
That may or may not be a hint. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, cool. Well, I would love an OpTic Gaming charm for my guns.
Real quick on Rainbow Six, man, everyone's going to be like, oh my gosh, they're getting a Rainbow Six team. I'm not saying that. But I do like the way that they're thinking creatively about their viewership, right? Having those rewards come into the space. It's content creation mixed with esports and that engagement and what our industry allows for that. So we get Rainbow Six questions all the time, and it's cool to see that even you guys are thinking of that as well. So hats off to you.
I'm a big fan of the game personally, but you're right in that it is sort of that swirl cone of it's the OpTic swirl cone of esports and content creation in one. So it's cool. Yeah. It's cool to hear you at least looking at the space. So I guess we'll see. But I want to ask about Dota. I gotta get back on track here before Colin's not here.
Colin's not here to rein you in. Yeah, he actually before I went down, he actually told me to do that.
Yeah. He would, if he were here, he would be 100% being like, get off Rainbow Six, okay? But yeah, Dota 2. What I was astounded, truthfully, when I saw it. A lot of people have told us that this is a space that looks very frightening for an esports organization that hasn't been in it before. What was it about the space that you saw that made you think, yes, we're going to do this?
Yeah, I love the fan base in Dota. They remind me of, it feels like they're just all very strategic thinkers that are looking at the space in such a, I don't know if the word is like a fresh way, or if it's just a way that I'm not used to that makes it feel so new and exciting. But when you watch TI, right, the engagement, the production level, the feel, it's very like, it's overwhelming in the sense, right? And I always looked at that and said, man, I really want to go and I've never experienced that at one of those events specifically. And it just gives you a lot of pride in the space to say, man, look at esports. It is big, and it's engaging, and it's exciting, and people have opinions. Some express them in very very profound ways. Some appropriate, some inappropriate. But it just has that very prime time, big league, jump on board, let the wave just hit you in the face type environment. And I think that's part of the reason that made it so exciting.
Okay, but it is, I think you're right, like Dota is extremely exciting, and the fan base is different. They are unlike any other fan base in esports, and I think that's really notable. But the thing that we kind of keep coming back to is that there are very few and when I say non-endemic, obviously there's the sense of non-endemic, like, in that they're not associated with esports, but orgs that have not been associated with Dota for a very long time. OpTic is one of the very few that is involved in Dota right now, and I'm wondering, why is Dota essentially so scary for an outside investor?
Well, I'm starting to wonder. I guess I want to answer your question a little more generally. I'm starting to wonder and see if, well, I've seen this when we were on our capital run. Um, Investors, are they asking the question? And I'm posing this kind of to you guys as well.
Mhm.
Do you believe that they're asking the question, if it's not franchised, how do I operate a successful business? How do I grow the business? How is cash flow coming in and going out aside from just sponsorships? Are there content creation opportunities around it? What other ecosystem attributes are really applicable here? And I'm saying that because I truly believe that franchising was really, really good for esports. I believe it adds a lens of transparency that maybe other brands and other strategic or financial partners didn't quite see. It kind of ushers out the Wild West and allows better organization, better monetization for teams. There's better ways to build ecosystem and promotional and marketing strategies around it. And I don't know. So I guess that question is something that we're still fleshing out for ourselves. But in that process, we're asking that question too, right? You know, is it because it feels too Wild West? Is it right? I don't know if we have that official answer yet.
Do you think that, at least from your perspective, do you think that more esports should franchise if it was something that was sort of effective for these games? We've seen it in 2 games. Should it go further?
Well, I'm not saying it's the cure all, right? I wouldn't prescribe it as the absolute number one thing and should be across the board. But I am leaning towards saying that franchising is very, very critical. It's especially critical for teams because of the way you can better manage a business under the franchise model, right? We've really seen that internally with the Outlaws. There's better coordination between the league. You actually know that the publisher and developer is behind it. They're very transparent in many cases about their KPIs and their goals for the league and how it's going to relate profitably and positively to our business, how it affects the players, their personal growth, the overall brand growth. There's so many different aspects that come into there that allow you to start evaluating how you're running your business, and that I think that's important for many people across the board. So, yeah, I would say franchising is going to be an important next step over the next 10 years.
Ryan, I want to chime in on the Dota thing a little bit because it often feels to me like if your team doesn't make TI or you don't have a team that is competing in that tournament, that probably feels really bad. You know what I'm saying? And I think that might be part of the hesitancy for these organizations because there's such huge exposure from TI. But if you don't
Right.
get it, then it feels almost like the cost of whatever you've done with the team, paying them obviously, but all the other activities that may have surrounded them might be sort of a lost, like they're just gone because they didn't get to TI, they didn't get on the main stage, they weren't in front of those millions of people watching the game all across the world. And it feels like maybe it's almost too all in on TI. And so if you're not part of that, it's like organizations like, why would I? So we've seen like organizations be like, I'm going to get this team because they are going to make TI for sure. So this is like a sure bet for me. I know for sure they're going to be there. But you've done something that's somewhat different. We don't know for sure that your team is going to make TI. Like, that's still up in the air. Obviously, you've got some great players on this roster, but we don't know. Like, it's not a thing where you're signing them like, yeah, you're in TI, great. Wear the OpTic shirt. We'll put you on stage. We'll get up there. You're up there. We're going to help you out, obviously. And I always just wonder if maybe that's not it. But it's a double-edged sword because TI, as you said, is wonderful. The crowd is unlike any event. The production value, it's great.
You mind if I comment on that real quick?
Yeah, no, please do.
It wasn't. That's an important part of the decision, yes, but it wasn't the penultimate, right? We didn't look at that and say it's only worth it if we go to TI. We look at it. We try to look at the space and say how do we also contribute versus just providing an opportunity to a pro player. Therefore, we can benefit if they go to TI. So for us, it's about what does it open up from a content perspective, given that that's a rich part of our culture? How are we rewarding our fans for expanding, right? So we get questions like that all the time, whether it's Rainbow Six or Dota, well, before we had Dota, Smash Brothers, games across the board. When are you guys getting into this? When are you guys getting into this? And so we look at that space and evaluate, okay, does it make sense for us to get into this? What opportunities are there, both for the pro player, but also for the brand, and how can we work together? So we have an altruistic lens that we try to put on when it comes to evaluating whether or not we get into a game. And I think for Dota, while TI is attractive, we were looking at other characteristics or other ways to mutually benefit, from content creation to getting to know a different part of the space that we previously had not been involved with.
I want to jump from Dota to a related field, another Valve game, CS:GO. Obviously, you guys have been in CS:GO for a while now, and you have a relatively new roster as of, I think, last month. I want to kind of ask, and this is maybe a bit of a, I don't mean this in the way it's going to sound, but I want to know, why will this CS:GO roster succeed? Why was this CS:GO roster the one you built, and why are you effectively committed to North America within CS:GO, where you got basing your guys out in NA?
Yeah, it's a great question. Our history with CS:GO has been so unique, right? There's ups and there's downs, and that's just kind of part of the space. It's absolutely been a wild ride. I think when we first stepped into CS:GO, we had a lot of learning to do about that new part of the space, right? We were only console at the time. That was our first PC expansion. And the scene probably was more mature than maybe we had anticipated. So there was some great growth that came out of that. Now that's the preface to saying, when you look at our new roster, we see a lot more chemistry across the board, and that chemistry is further cemented by Stanislaw or Peter. My light just turned off. Sorry about that.
It's fine.
He's so good at in-game leadership, right? He makes great calls, and he took us to a championship, right? Winning E-League Season 2. But when you have a good in-game leader and good chemistry, or at least a perception or belief that this squad can work really, really well and complement each other on the field, there's that complement word again, that we will be more successful. So that's really how we're kind of looking at the space and this run. And being in North America really has to be more of just a logistical reason of, you get everyone on the same page, they're in the same area, but they're also interacting with all of the expansion that we've put into after going through or being a part of Infinite, and just really growing out the space, right? I feel like it's important for the players to know who's running merch or who's creating graphics. We want them to feel involved and a part of this special thing that we're building, in addition to realizing how unique it is to be with their team and building that chemistry as well. So,
Ryan, I want to go into the distant past now. I've got a couple questions about the old days of OpTic. I actually read the OpTic book, so.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So I did read all your chapters and whatnot. So, I mean, you almost got out of this thing entirely, right? Oh, well, you did for a period of time. You said, I'm done with this, and Hex took over. Obviously, you've come back to it, and to see you now as the president of OpTic and having made that decision in the past, it's such a cool opportunity to get to talk about some of the old OpTic stuff. I want to ask you about probably, you're talking about helping people build their personal brands. This is maybe the biggest personal brand that OpTic Gaming has ever helped build, that of Nadeshot. And I want to ask, what was your first impression of him when you met him? I mean, he was kind of an awkward guy when he first joined the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I met him when he was a lot younger, but very pleasant. Just smiles all around. Fun guy to be around, to talk to, and that was the first time I actually had ever met, I think, a pro player before. So I was kind of just taken back of what is this relationship dynamic, right? I was a lot younger as well. I mean, that's 8 years ago now when I first met him in 2010. So that dynamic has certainly evolved, and I'm very proud of him, because he was such a quiet behind-the-scenes guy. Now he's really developed into a mature individual on the content side. He's grown a great brand in 100 Thieves, and has expanded his reach. People don't watch Nadeshot just because he's a Call of Duty player. They watch him because he's got a great lifestyle brand. He knows how to build a rapport with his community and his audience. And now he's proven he can take it a step further by growing a great brand in the NLCS. So
I guess I want to ask, because you said something earlier, and I want to kind of circle back to that I think is really important, which is that you don't want content creation to affect the victory possibility, like the outcome of these players. But I think it might be fair to say, at least in Nadeshot's case, that he went hard on content creation to the point where he used the words burned out. Like, he burned out. It was too much. He couldn't deal with it, and he burned out. Do you think we will ever see another player who can compete at that high level, but also do as much content creation and build his brand as much as we saw from Nadeshot?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Scump has a lot of potential to do that as well. And what I like about Scump, though, is that he's just so focused on competition, right? So he may not even have the aspiration to go and kind of transform a different route in the way Nadeshot did. But I think we'll see that many more times in the overall history of esports. Absolutely. And they're right. Like, when you think of burnout content, so I worked at YouTube for a few years, and part of what we taught new and aspiring creators is that if you're going to get into this game, you need to develop a format that is going to allow you to have a repeatable experience, right? You don't want to create videos that are just overwhelmingly complex and dynamic week over week, right? What is your daily content, your daily short form content? And sure, you layer in some more long form pieces. So so long as players can figure out that balance, or what you might see is players saying, hey, I don't want to figure out the balance. I either want to be full-blown competition and dabble a little bit, or I want to be full-blown content. And maybe not, you can't just dabble in competition, right? You have to really, really focus. So I think that fork in the road is going to cause decisions, but for the players that can maintain both, more power to them. But it's tough. It is tough to do. It is tough to do.
All right, I know we're coming up kind of around the end of the time we have with you, but before we get to the very last thing and let you go, I want to ask just, I guess, a big general thing. What, obviously, you guys are kind of sitting now on this big esports empire of all the games you're in, all the teams you have. What is sort of the next step for OpTic Gaming as an entity right now?
I think the next step is really for us to focus and continue to do what we really, really do well, and that's content and competition. But you're starting to layer in new dynamics to it, right? So having performance coaches involved to up our game on the competition side, but also stand out amongst our competitors, to help grow the individual brands, not just so much on the main stage or with content, but with merchandise and sponsorships, right, and endorsements. And then looking at, well, how do we affect the community altruistically? What does it look to throw in events that's maybe OpTic centric and have our players involved there, but also what does it look like to focus on youth and academy development? How do we find the next Scumpy before she or he is the next Scumpy, right? We're looking at it from more of a esports is not just a thing or a competition, it's a movement, and we want to be at the front of that movement. We want to help steer the ship, and we want to bring, again, altruistic and complementary. Those are very powerful words that we often discuss in our brand meetings. How do we affect it at that level, right? Are we working with schools and colleges? Are we working with kids at the youth academy level? The examples I continually keep giving. How do we continue to grow that ecosystem across the board versus just expanding the team, right? Versus just saying, how do we expand players? How do we just compete better? I think it has more to do with the overarching theme of esports and all of the industries that can be affected positively by esports. So,
all right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I guess just before we let you go, is there anything you want to touch on that we didn't get a chance to talk about? Any shout outs you want to give? Anything you want to say to the green wall, as it were? Anything you want to touch on?
Yeah, really just thank you. I mean, because you look at OpTic, right? I look at myself as kind of like a backseat co-founder in a sense, right? I was there when it was just like the YMCA days. We'd go to work, we'd come home, we'd play video games. And it was really Hector who took the brand built content around it, chose to focus on content, built these brands out. He did such a great job with building those people up and bringing the brand to that powerful esports name, right? And I went the different route. I went the corporate route. I worked at Machinima and digital and startups, and I went to Google, then back into startups, and ultimately full-time executive 2 years ago at OpTic, and now being a part of what it's become at this level with Infinite Esports Entertainment. And if you don't have that fan base there, I don't know. I just look at it so different. But to have that level of support just leads us to a big thank you. So it's cool to see us come to a head like this. And what's crazy about it is that we're just getting started still just getting started. So.
All right. Well, that's awesome, and good luck with all of the building that there still is to do. And thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, great questions, everybody. Thank you guys as well, and looking forward to catching up sometime again in the future.
Absolutely, would love to have you on again. All right, have a great day, man. Bye. Take it easy. All right, there was some interesting stuff said there. I mean, I think I've spoken to him at least once before, but Ryan always has really interesting stuff to say about sort of the state of esports, since he kind of comes from that. He has that old school flair, but also comes from a bit of that corporate background.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because when I think back to the early days of this, I can't imagine that anybody except Hector really knew what could happen.
Yeah.
And to me, to have OpTicJ be here as the president of this company in 2018, it's just like it's such a cool story.
You have become the OpTic Gaming history nerd, though.
I don't know about that.
You are the keeper of the OpTic holocron.
It's interesting because this is just like such a crazy story. That's all.
Sure.
Like,
no, it is an amazing story, and I think it's one of those stories that is sort of foundational to esports in a certain way. Because I do think when I said that other people have sort of mimicked OpTic's content strategy, I think they really have. I think people look at OpTic and I mean FaZe to a certain extent, which also kind of mimic OpTic to a certain extent.
No, 100%.
Right? Like that. At
least when they started.
That was the strategy. I think a lot of people have looked at what OpTic has done and are trying to imitate it across other games, and I think it's fascinating to hear Ryan sort of talk about what goes into making that, but also the considerations of how you build that in a way that's like good for your players and not just your fans. Because I think a perception of a lot of this stuff is that it is fans love it, but the players hate doing it, and I don't think that's necessarily true. And I think that he made a point that it wasn't.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a tricky balance, and I think Nadeshot was an interesting person to talk about just because I think that was the first time we saw somebody get that popular, but still be at that level of competition.
I will say, speaking of Nadeshot, I think we've actually made good on Colin, not made fully good on Colin's promise, but this is another LCS team executive.
Hey,
there you go. That's I think is that 9 out of 10?
That's 9 out of 10. Yeah.
All right, we're coming for you. You know who you are, number 10. You know who you are.
There's only one of you.
There's literally only one of you. Just you know who you are. Everybody knows who they are. I'm trying to do my best Colin impression right now. A lot of hand talking, a lot of sort of aggressive gesticulating and jostling.
If you want to do a Colin impression, you should be doing a Yoda impression.
I'm not going to do a Yoda impression. You're not going to. That's not going to happen.
Okay. I tried, Colin.
That's not
sorry,
going to
man.
happen. All right. I guess I'm taking us out of this hot room. Or do you want to take us out?
Go for it, man.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening. For Josh Burry, for the ghost of Colin McNeil. I've been Daniel Rosen. This has been the theScore Esports Podcast. Until next time, GG.